I'm going to shift metaphors here for a minute. And if we look at the decline of America as a disease, how would we as a I'm a medical person, how would we treat a disease? Well, the first thing we have to do before you can treat a disease is to correctly make the diagnosis. Now, if I think you have malaria, but you actually have tularemia, I'm not going to treat you right. So we have to make the right diagnosis. We do this by cataloging and analyzing the symptoms. Symptoms are what the patient complains about. So this is what the American people would complain about. And we examine the signs. Signs meaning I, as a physician with trained skills, examine the patient and find out things that maybe the patient doesn't know about himself. So let's do this for our economic decline. What are the symptoms? Well, I think that I don't have to convince you that there's decreased economic development, and this leads to under and unemployment. There's also escalating prices. You know, the government would tell us that we have 2 to 3% inflation or less. I'm going to tell you that's only believed by people that don't buy things. I actually raised chickens as a hobby, and the chicken feed that I bought for 2 years ago for $11 is now $16. That's not 2%, and that's at the base of the food chain. And you can pick other things similarly that have gone up. I'll tell you one of the scariest things I've heard recently is I live in a small town, 1,400 people. My hardware store guy that sells me the chicken feed told me that about 6 months ago, for the first time in 15 years, he had to hire a second person just to reprice things because prices were changing so rapidly. Now, I want you to think about that economic symptom. Well, anyway, also I think we'd agree there's a diminishing standard of living. I mean, how many adult children are moving back with their parents because they can't live independently at entry-level wages? And sadly and most dangerously, we have a diminishing middle class. Now, in orthopedics, we have a symptom of shortage of physicians. You know, as far as I know, and I may be wrong about this, but I think I'm right, there has not been a new orthopedic residency slot opened up since I was a resident. In fact, I know we lost 5 slots in Phoenix, Arizona. So we have a bigger population and we have an aging population, but we have the same number of orthopedic surgeons or less. In fact, it's not just orthopedics, by the way. There are only 12,000 oncologists in the whole nation, and we only train 300 general surgeons a year. So there's a shortage of necessities. I'm going to tell you, now the only way you can, what I've learned from reading Economics 101 is the only way you can produce a shortage is price controls. But we have a shortage for the first time in my 30-year career in medicine of necessities. We were out of Valium last week to treat seizures. Now, not because we didn't order it, but because there's a national shortage. When I was at the trauma center a few years ago, we were out of tetanus toxoid to give to our open femurs and tibias. We almost had to shut down the operating room a month ago for lack of etomidate, which is a reversal agent for anesthesia. We were out of Levaquin is short. You name it. There's pain pump catheters we were out of for about a month. It's unbelievable what shortages are cropping up in the practice of medicine today that I've never seen before. And of course there's an uncertainty of investment, and I know you guys have that. It's interesting, when I go to the surgeon, when I used to go sitting around in the surgeon's lounge with 6 or 8 surgeons and anesthesiologists, we used to talk about cases. But in the last few years, we started talking about, gosh, do I buy gold? Do I buy property? Do I go over offshore? What do I do? Nobody knows, And we not only have escalating overhead, which I know you're aware of. I mean, we pay our light bill and our FICA and all that sort of stuff. We have escalating overhead, but at the same time, we have price controls. So Medicare pays us less. They don't care that my malpractice went up. They don't care that my staff salaries went up, my light bill went up. And we have fear of prosecution, which I'm going to get into here in just a minute.